Hey guys, tonight we're going to drift back, way back, to a time before the United States was even a glimmer in a powdered wig-wearing founder's eye. You're standing on a vast, quiet continent. The air is so clean it almost hurts to breathe, and the only sounds are the rustle of wind through impossibly tall grasses and the distant call of a bird you've never heard before. There are no cities, no highways, just an endless expanse of nature, teeming with life. You can feel the cool, damp earth beneath your feet, a silent testament to the thousands of years of history that have unfolded right here, long before the first European ships appeared on the horizon. It's a world of immense power and subtle beauty. But don't get too comfortable. Statistically speaking, if you were actually here, a saber-toothed cat would probably be eyeing you as a potential midnight snack. You probably won't survive this. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is. It's always fascinating to see how far these stories travel. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're walking across a land bridge, but it's not some rickety rope and plank affair. This is Beringia, a massive 1,000-mile-wide subcontinent of chilly, windswept plains connecting what we now call Siberia and Alaska. The air is thin and brutally cold, and you pull your animal hide cloak tighter, the scent of wood smoke clinging to the fur. It's about 15,000 years ago, and your small family group is following the tracks of a woolly mammoth, its shaggy form a dark shape against the endless ice and snow. This is the mainstream theory anyway, the one where the first peoples of the Americas, the Paleo-Indians, crossed over from Asia in pursuit of megafauna. You can almost hear the low, rumbling growl of the mammoth's stomach, a sound that promises sustenance and survival for weeks if your hunters are successful. The sheer scale of the landscape is hard to comprehend. Ice sheets, miles high, glitter in the pale sunlight to your east and west, carving and shaping the very bones of the continent. Historians still argue whether this was the only route, or if some early adventurers traveled down the coast in small, skin-covered boats, hopping from one icy island to the next. It's a much more romantic image, isn't it? Paddling through a maze of glaciers, dodging sea lions, and staring into the deep, frigid water, wondering what lay beyond the next fog bank. But for now, you're on foot. Your journey isn't a single epic trek, but a slow, generational creep. You and your descendants will spread out, following the rivers, the coastlines, and the herds. As the great ice sheets retreat, they leave behind a transformed world. You find yourself in lush forests, arid deserts, and sprawling grasslands. The megafauna, the mammoths, the giant sloths, the comically oversized beavers, begin to disappear. Maybe it was the changing climate. Maybe it was the relentless pressure of your very effective hunting spears. It's another one of those debates that keeps archaeologists up at night. As the big game vanishes, you adapt. You become an expert forager, learning the secrets of every plant, root, and berry. You develop new tools, smaller and more refined, for hunting the deer, rabbits, and bison that now dominate the landscape. Fast forward a few thousand years. Your descendants have populated the entire hemisphere, from the Arctic Circle to the tip of South America. And they haven't just survived, they've thrived, creating a breathtaking mosaic of cultures. In the desert Southwest, you're living in a multi-story apartment complex built into the side of a cliff. These are the ancestral Puebloans, and their masonry is so precise, it's hard to believe it was done without modern tools. You spend your days tending to fields of maize, beans, and squash, irrigated by a complex system of canals. The sun is relentless, but the thick adobe walls of your home keep the interior cool and dark. At night, you gather in a circular, subterranean room called a kiva, its smoky air filled with the low murmur of prayers and stories. Here's a quirky tidbit for you. Some of these communities also domesticated turkeys. Not just for food, but for their feathers, which were used to make warm blankets and ceremonial robes. Imagine a society where your comforter is also a status symbol. Meanwhile, up in the Ohio River Valley, you're part of the Adena and later the Hopewell cultures. You're not building cliff dwellings, you're building mounds. Massive earthen structures that rise from the flat, fertile landscape. Some are simple burial mounds, conical and solemn. Others are effigies, shaped like serpents, birds, or bears, their forms only truly visible from high above. The most famous, the Serpent Mound, is nearly 1/4 of a mile long, its undulating body coiling towards an egg-shaped oval. You help haul basket after basket of earth, your muscles aching, part of a community effort that spans generations. These aren't just graves, they're ceremonial centers, astronomical observatories, and social gathering places. You're part of a vast trade network that stretches for thousands of miles. You might be wearing a necklace of shells from the Gulf of Mexico, smoking a pipe carved from stone quarried in Minnesota, and admiring a sheet of mica from the Carolinas. It's like an ancient Amazon Prime, but with a much longer delivery time. And on the mighty Mississippi River, you are a citizen of Cahokia. Around the year 1100 AD, this is the largest city north of Mexico, a bustling metropolis of perhaps 20,000 people. You live in a small, thatched, roofed house in the shadow of Monk's Mound, a colossal, 4-terraced platform mound that's larger at its base than the Great Pyramid of Giza. Atop it sits the ruler's residence, a place of power and mystery. The city is a hub of commerce, religion, and politics. You might be a farmer, a craftsman, a priest, or a warrior. You play a game called Chunky, rolling a stone disc across a packed earth courtyard and throwing spears to see who can land closest to where it stops. It's a serious sport, with high-stakes gambling and occasionally ritualistic significance. The city is vibrant and alive, a testament to the incredible organizational skills and cultural achievements of the Mississippian people. But by the time the first Europeans arrive in the area, Cahokia is a ghost town. Its great mounds overgrown and its plazas silent. What happened? Was it disease, warfare, climate change, or political collapse? The mystery of its decline is a puzzle that continues to fascinate and elude us. A quiet reminder that even the greatest cities can fade back into the earth. As the whispers of Cahokia fade into the rustle of the tall grasses, your journey through time takes a sharp turn. The quiet solitude of the continent is about to be shattered by the arrival of something entirely new, something that will irrevocably alter the course of history. You're standing on a pristine coastline, the waves gently lapping at your feet, when a strange silhouette appears on the horizon. It's a ship, but unlike any vessel you've ever seen, a towering, multi-masted behemoth, its sails billowing like enormous white clouds. This is the mainstream historical fact. European exploration of the Americas began in earnest with Christopher Columbus's voyage in 1492, marking the start of a new era of transatlantic exchange. You watch, a mixture of awe and apprehension stirring within you as smaller boats are lowered, carrying figures clad in peculiar clothing, their skin a shade you've never encountered. They carry strange tools, glinting in the sun, and their voices are a cacophony of unfamiliar sounds. This isn't just an encounter, it's a collision of worlds, and the ripples of this moment will spread across centuries. The initial encounters are often marked by curiosity, sometimes by trade, and all too frequently by misunderstanding and violence. You see the Europeans, driven by a thirst for gold, land, and souls, begin to establish footholds. They bring with them not just their ambitions, but also something far more insidious: diseases. Smallpox, measles, influenza. These invisible invaders sweep through your communities like wildfire, decimating populations that have no natural immunity. It's a tragic, unintended consequence, a silent killer that paves the way for conquest.
Historians still argue whether the scale of this demographic catastrophe was primarily due to disease or if warfare and forced labor played an equally important role in the rapid decline of indigenous populations. You witness the once thriving villages become eerily quiet, the vibrant communal life replaced by a haunting silence. It's a stark reminder of how interconnected the world truly is, even when separated by vast oceans. But the Europeans aren't a monolithic entity. You see different flags, hear different languages. The Spanish, driven by the lure of gold and the zeal of conversion, established vast empires in the south, stretching from Mexico through Central and South America and into what will become the American Southwest. You might find yourself in a dusty mission, forced to abandon your traditional ways for a new religion, or to toil in a mine, extracting the very wealth that fuels the European expansion. Then there are the French, who venture into the interior, following the great rivers, establishing trading posts and forging alliances with indigenous nations, primarily for the lucrative fur trade. You might see a French trapper, his face weathered by the elements, exchanging metal tools for beaver pelts, a surprisingly amicable, if still unequal, relationship. And finally, the English, who focus their efforts on the eastern seaboard, seeking not just wealth, but also religious freedom and new opportunities for settlement. It's a bit like a land rush, but with more corsets and fewer cowboy hats.
Let's zoom in on the English. You're now in Jamestown, Virginia, in the early 17th century. It's not the idyllic paradise you might imagine. The air is thick with humidity, the mosquitoes are relentless, and the water is brackish. The early colonists, many of them gentlemen unaccustomed to manual labor, are more interested in finding gold than planting crops. It's a recipe for disaster, and you witness starvation, disease, and constant conflict with the local Powhatan Confederacy. Here's a quirky tidbit. The early Jamestown settlers were so desperate that they resorted to cannibalism during the starving time of 1609 to 1610. Archaeological evidence has confirmed the grim tales once dismissed as mere rumor. The colony is on the brink of collapse until a man named John Rolfe introduces a new, sweeter strain of tobacco. Suddenly, Virginia has a cash crop, and the colony's fortunes begin to change. This in turn creates a voracious appetite for labor, setting the stage for the arrival of the first enslaved Africans in 1619, a moment that will cast a long and dark shadow over the nation's future. Further north, you find a different kind of English colony. You're on the deck of the Mayflower in 1620, a separatist fleeing religious persecution in England. The journey has been long and arduous, and as you gaze upon the shores of what will become Massachusetts, you and your fellow passengers draft the Mayflower Compact, a simple agreement to form a civil body politic. It's a foundational moment, an early experiment in self-government. The first winter is brutal, and many of your fellow pilgrims don't survive. But with the help of the Wampanoag people, particularly a man named Tisquantum, or Squanto, who miraculously speaks English, you learn to plant corn and survive in this new world. The famous First Thanksgiving is a harvest festival, a moment of fleeting peace and cooperation in a story that will soon become much more complicated. As the 17th century unfolds, more and more English colonies spring up along the coast, each with its own distinct character. You have the Puritans in Massachusetts Bay, creating a city upon a hill that is both pious and intolerant. You have the Quakers in Pennsylvania, led by William Penn, who preaches religious freedom and peaceful coexistence with the Native Americans. You have the Catholics in Maryland, the Debtors in Georgia, and the Dutch in New York, with their bustling, cosmopolitan port of New Amsterdam. It's a patchwork of different dreams and ambitions, a laboratory of social and political experiments. And as these colonies grow and prosper, they develop their own unique identities, their own ways of life, and a growing sense of independence from the mother country across the sea. The stage is being set for a new chapter, one where these disparate colonies will have to decide if they are English or something else entirely.
As the 18th century dawns, you find yourself in a bustling colonial city, perhaps Boston or Philadelphia. The air is thick with the scent of commerce, spices from distant lands, fresh-baked bread, and the tang of the sea. You're no longer a new arrival, you're a colonist, a generation or two removed from the old world. You speak English, but with a distinct accent, and your loyalties are increasingly divided. On one hand, you're proud to be British, part of a powerful empire. On the other, you feel a growing resentment towards the distant parliament that seems to dictate your life without truly understanding it. This is the mainstream historical fact. The American Revolution was not a sudden explosion, but a slow burn, fueled by decades of growing tension between the colonies and Great Britain over issues of taxation and representation. You hear whispers in taverns, read pamphlets passed from hand to hand, all questioning the fairness of British rule. It's like being a teenager who suddenly realizes their parents' rules don't quite make sense anymore, but with muskets instead of slammed doors. The French and Indian War, which raged from 1754 to 1763, was a pivotal moment. You fought alongside British regulars against the French and their Native American allies, learning valuable lessons about warfare and, perhaps more importantly, about your own capabilities. Britain won, securing vast new territories in North America, but the victory came at a steep price. To pay off the war debt, Parliament began imposing new taxes on the colonies. The Stamp Act of 1765, which required a tax stamp on all printed materials, from legal documents to playing cards, ignited a firestorm of protest. You join angry crowds chanting, "No taxation without representation!" You boycott British goods, and the Sons of Liberty, a secret society of patriots, organize protests and even acts of intimidation against tax collectors. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some colonists would tar and feather tax collectors, a painful and humiliating punishment that involved pouring hot tar on the victim and then covering them with feathers. Not exactly a spa day, is it? Historians still argue whether the British government genuinely misunderstood the depth of colonial resentment or if they simply underestimated the colonists' willingness to resist. The repeal of the Stamp Act brings it temporary calm, but the underlying issues remain. Parliament asserts its right to tax the colonies in all cases whatsoever, and new taxes like the Townshend Acts on tea, glass, and paper soon follow. You witness the Boston Massacre in 1770, where British soldiers fire into a crowd of protesters, killing 5. The image of Crispus Attucks, a free black man falling in the snow, becomes a powerful symbol of colonial oppression. Then comes the Boston Tea Party in 1773, where you, or someone very much like you, disguised as a Mohawk Indian, dump 342 chests of British tea into Boston Harbor. It's a bold act of defiance, a theatrical protest that sends a clear message across the Atlantic. The British response is swift and harsh. The intolerable acts, closing Boston Harbor and placing Massachusetts under direct British control. This is the point of no return. You feel the air crackle with tension, the inevitability of conflict hanging heavy.
In September 1774, you attend the First Continental Congress in Philadelphia, a gathering of delegates from 12 of the 13 colonies. They debate, they argue, but ultimately, they agree to boycott British goods and to send a petition to King George III demanding a redress of grievances. It's a desperate attempt at reconciliation, but it's too late. The fuse has been lit. On April 19, 1775, you hear the shots fired at Lexington and Concord, the shot heard round the world. The war has begun. You might be a farmer, grabbing your musket and joining the local militia, or a city dweller, watching as British troops march through your streets. The early days of the war are chaotic, marked by both defeats and surprising victories for the fledgling American forces. In 1776, Thomas Paine's pamphlet Common Sense sweeps through the colonies like wildfire. You read its powerful arguments for independence, its clear, concise language cutting through the lingering doubts. It's a call to action, a logical dismantling of the idea of monarchy, and a passionate plea for self-governance. On July 4, 1776, you stand in Philadelphia as the Declaration of Independence is adopted. You hear the words, "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed with their Creator with certain inalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness." It's a revolutionary statement, a promise of a new kind of nation, even if the reality of that promise will take centuries to fulfill for all its inhabitants. You feel a surge of hope, a belief that something truly extraordinary is being born. The war is long and brutal. You endure harsh winters, like the one at Valley Forge, where Washington's Continental Army suffers terribly from cold, hunger, and disease. You witness battles like Saratoga, a crucial American victory that convinces France to ally with the United States, providing much-needed military and financial aid. You see the tide turn at Yorktown in 1781, where a combined American and French force traps the British Army, forcing their surrender. The war is over. You've won. But now comes the hard part, building a nation from scratch. The Articles of Confederation, the first attempt at a national government, proved too weak, a loose alliance of states rather than a unified country. It's like trying to build a house with wet spaghetti. It just doesn't hold together. So in 1787, you're back in Philadelphia, attending the Constitutional Convention. 55 delegates, including towering figures like George Washington, James Madison, and Benjamin Franklin, gathered to craft a new framework for government. It's a summer of intense debate, compromise, and brilliant political innovation. You hear arguments about the balance of power between large and small states, between federal and state authority, and, most controversially, about the institution of slavery. The result is the United States Constitution, a document that establishes a republic with a system of checks and balances designed to prevent any one branch of government from becoming too powerful. It's a masterpiece of political engineering, a testament to the idea that people can govern themselves. You feel the weight of history in that room, the sense that you are witnessing something truly enduring. The nation is born, but its journey has only begun.
With the Constitution ratified and George Washington at the helm, you find yourself in a young nation, brimming with potential, but also fraught with internal tensions. The ink on the parchment is barely dry, yet already the grand experiment of self-governance is facing its first true tests. You're in the capital, which for a time is New York City, then Philadelphia, before the swampy future site of Washington, D.C. is chosen. The air is thick with debate, not just in the halls of government, but in every tavern and coffeehouse. This is the mainstream historical fact. The early American Republic was immediately challenged by deep political divisions, primarily between Federalists and Anti-Federalists over the interpretation of the Constitution and the role of the federal government. It's like a family dinner where everyone agrees on the main course but then argues endlessly about the side dishes and who gets to do the washing up. Alexander Hamilton, Washington's Secretary of the Treasury, is a force of nature. You see him tirelessly working to establish a strong national economy. He proposes a national bank, a system of tariffs, and the assumption of state debts by the federal government. To you, it sounds like a brilliant plan to stabilize the fledgling nation's finances, but to others, like Thomas Jefferson, the Secretary of State, Hamilton's vision seems to echo the very British centralized power they just fought a war to escape. Jefferson, with his agrarian ideals, envisions a nation of independent farmers, not urban industrialists. You hear their arguments, passionate and eloquent, shaping the very fabric of American political thought. Historians still argue whether the animosity between Hamilton and Jefferson was primarily a clash of personalities or a fundamental disagreement over the future direction of the American experiment. It's a debate that continues to resonate in American politics even today. The Whiskey Rebellion of 1794 is a moment that truly tests the new government's authority.
You're a farmer in western Pennsylvania, and you rely on distilling your surplus grain into whiskey to transport it to market. When Hamilton's excise tax on whiskey is imposed, you feel it's an unfair burden, a distant government once again taxing your livelihood. You join your neighbors in protest, some of you even resorting to armed resistance, reminiscent of the Stamp Act protests. But this time, the response is different. President Washington himself leads a federalized militia of 13,000 troops to quell the rebellion. You watch, perhaps with a mixture of fear and grudging respect, as the federal government demonstrates its power to enforce its laws. It's a clear message. This new republic isn't messing around. Here's a quirky tidbit. The rebellion was so serious that Washington became the only sitting U.S. president to personally lead troops in the field. Imagine Biden showing up at the National Guard to break up a protest over, say, a new tax on avocado toast. It just wouldn't happen.
Foreign policy is another minefield. You're caught between the warring giants of Europe, revolutionary France and Great Britain. Both demand your loyalty and both threaten your shipping. Washington, in his farewell address, famously warns against entangling alliances, a principle that will guide American foreign policy for over a century. You witness the XYZ affair, where French agents demand bribes from American diplomats, leading to an undeclared naval war with France. It's a moment of national outrage, uniting the country against a common enemy, at least for a little while. The young nation is trying to find its footing on the global stage, asserting its independence while navigating a treacherous international landscape. Then comes the election of 1800, a truly pivotal moment. You're a voter, perhaps a landowner, and you cast your ballot in a system that is still evolving. The election is a bitter contest between John Adams, the Federalist incumbent, and Thomas Jefferson, the Democratic-Republican challenger. The campaign is nasty, filled with personal attacks and accusations. When the Electoral College vote results in a tie between Jefferson and his running mate, Aaron Burr, the decision goes to the House of Representatives. For 36 ballots, the House is deadlocked. You hold your breath, wondering if this fragile republic will survive its first true transfer of power. Finally, largely due to Hamilton's influence, Jefferson is elected. It's a peaceful transition, a testament to the strength of the new constitutional system, even if it feels like the nation just dodged a bullet. It's a moment that solidifies the two-party system, setting the stage for centuries of political rivalry. As the nation expands, so does the thorny issue of slavery. You see the cotton gin, invented by Eli Whitney in 1793, revolutionize cotton production in the South. Suddenly, cotton becomes king, and the demand for enslaved labor skyrockets. The economic incentives for slavery become deeply entrenched, creating a stark contrast between the industrializing North and the agrarian, slave-holding South. You hear the debates in Congress, the compromises made, the uneasy truces that only postpone the inevitable reckoning. The Louisiana Purchase in 1803, a massive land deal with France, doubles the size of the United States overnight. You gaze at the vast, unexplored territory stretching from the Mississippi River to the Rocky Mountains, and you wonder, will this new land be free or slave? The question hangs heavy in the air, a dark cloud on the horizon of an otherwise optimistic future. It's a problem that the founders, for all their brilliance, kicked down the road, and it's a problem that will continue to haunt the nation for decades to come, threatening to tear it apart.
As the 19th century unfolds, you feel an irresistible pull towards the setting sun. The Louisiana Purchase, that colossal land deal, has opened up a vast, unknown frontier, and the promise of new land, new opportunities, and new adventures beckons. You pack your meager belongings into a covered wagon, perhaps a Conestoga, and join a slow, creaking procession heading west. The dust rises in clouds, coating everything in a fine, gritty layer, and the endless horizon seems to stretch out forever. This is the mainstream historical fact, the concept of manifest destiny, The belief that the United States was divinely ordained to expand across the North American continent fueled an unprecedented era of westward expansion, often at the expense of indigenous populations and neighboring nations. It's like a really ambitious road trip, but instead of snacks and podcasts, you've got dysentery and rattlesnakes. Your journey is fraught with peril. Rivers swell with spring rains, turning into treacherous torrents. Mountains loom, their peaks, snow-capped even in summer, demanding arduous climbs. You face hunger, disease, and the constant threat of encounters with Native American tribes, many of whom view your westward march as an invasion of their ancestral lands. The War of 1812, sometimes called the Second War of Independence, briefly interrupts this westward push, as the young nation once again clashes with Great Britain. You might find yourself fighting alongside Andrew Jackson at the Battle of New Orleans, a decisive American victory that, ironically, was fought after the peace treaty had already been signed. It's like a really ambitious road trip, but instead of snacks and podcasts, you've got dysentery and rattlesnakes. After the war, the westward migration resumes with renewed vigor. You see the rise of the mountain men, rugged individuals who brave the wilderness in search of beaver pelts, living off the land and often forming complex relationships with Native American tribes. They're the original influencers, but instead of sponsored posts, they're trading furs. Then comes the Oregon Trail, a 2,000-mile odyssey that thousands of pioneers undertake, dreaming of fertile lands in the Pacific Northwest. You might be one of them, pushing your wagon through scorching deserts and over towering mountain ranges, your eyes fixed on the distant promise of a new life. Here's a quirky tidbit. Many pioneers on the Oregon Trail brought along pianos, which they would often abandon along the way when the going got tough. Imagine dragging a grand piano across the Rockies only to ditch it in the middle of nowhere. Talk about commitment to your craft, or perhaps a really misjudgment of priorities.
As you move west, you inevitably encounter the existing inhabitants of the land. The forced removal of Native American tribes, often under brutal conditions, becomes a dark chapter in American history. The Indian Removal Act of 1830, championed by President Andrew Jackson, leads to the infamous Trail of Tears, where thousands of Cherokee, Choctaw, Chickasaw, Creek, and Seminole people are forcibly marched from their ancestral lands in the southeastern United States to Indian Territory in present-day Oklahoma. You witness the suffering, the loss, the profound injustice of it all. Historians still argue whether the policies of Indian removal were primarily driven by racial prejudice or by the insatiable demand for land by white settlers. It's a complex and painful legacy, one that continues to shape the relationship between Native Americans and the U.S. government. The concept of manifest destiny isn't just about settling empty lands. It's also about acquiring territory from other nations. You find yourself embroiled in the Mexican-American War, 1846 to 1848, a conflict sparked by the annexation of Texas and a dispute over its southern border. You might be a soldier, marching through dusty, unfamiliar terrain, fighting battles in places like Palo Alto and Monterey. The war is controversial, even at the time, with many Americans questioning its morality and necessity. But the outcome is undeniable. The Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo cedes vast territories to the United States, including present-day California, Nevada, Utah, Arizona, New Mexico, and parts of Colorado and Wyoming. It's a massive land grab, expanding the nation's borders to the Pacific Ocean. You can almost hear the collective sigh of relief from mapmakers everywhere.
And then, just as you're settling into your newly acquired western lands, something extraordinary happens. Gold is discovered in California in 1848. The news spreads like wildfire, sparking the California gold rush. You drop everything, your farm, your job, your sensible shoes, and join the throngs of 49ers rushing to the gold fields. You might travel by sea around Cape Horn, a perilous journey, or overland, facing the same hardships as the Oregon Trail pioneers, but with the added frenzy of gold fever. You pan for gold in icy streams, dig shafts into hillsides, and dream of striking it rich. Most don't, of course, but the gold rush transforms California overnight, turning a sleepy Mexican territory into a booming, diverse, and often lawless American state. It's a wild, chaotic time, a true testament to the human desire for instant wealth. It's like the original dot-com bubble, but with more pickaxes and fewer venture capitalists. As the nation expands, the question of slavery becomes increasingly urgent and divisive. Each new territory acquired forces a confrontation. Will it be free or slave? The Missouri Compromise, the Compromise of 1850, the Kansas-Nebraska Act, these are all desperate attempts to maintain a fragile balance, to kick the can down the road. You witness the rise of abolitionism in the North, a moral crusade against the institution of slavery, and the fierce defense of slavery in the South, where it is seen as essential to their economy and way of life. The debates in Congress become increasingly acrimonious, the rhetoric more inflamed. You see the violence erupt in Kansas, earning it the nickname Bleeding Kansas, as pro-slavery and anti-slavery forces clash in a brutal preview of the larger conflict to come. The nation is growing, but it's also tearing itself apart, pulled in opposite directions by two irreconcilable visions of America. The stage is set for the ultimate reckoning, a conflict that will determine whether this grand experiment in self-governance can truly endure.
The year is 1860, and the fragile peace you've witnessed for decades has finally shattered. The question of slavery, which has simmered and boiled beneath the surface of American politics, has erupted into open conflict. You're standing on the precipice of the most devastating war in American history, a conflict that will pit brother against brother and redefine the very meaning of the United States. This is the mainstream historical fact. The American Civil War, 1861 to 1865, was fought primarily over the issue of slavery and states' rights, resulting in the abolition of slavery and the preservation of the Union. It's like a family argument that escalated way out of control, and now everyone's brought their biggest, loudest toys to the playground. The election of Abraham Lincoln, a Republican who campaigned on preventing the expansion of slavery into new territories, is the final straw for many southern states. You watch as South Carolina, followed by 10 other states, secedes from the Union, forming the Confederate States of America. They believe they have the right to govern themselves, to protect their way of life, which is inextricably linked to the institution of slavery. Lincoln, however, believes that the Union is perpetual, that states cannot simply leave. The tension builds, a suffocating weight in the air, until April 12, 1861, when Confederate forces fire on Fort Sumter in Charleston, South Carolina. The war has begun. You might be a young man in the North answering Lincoln's call for volunteers, filled with patriotic fervor to preserve the Union. Or you might be in the South, defending your home and your perceived way of life, convinced that you are fighting for liberty against federal tyranny. Historians still argue whether the war was truly inevitable, or if a different political path could have averted the bloodshed. It's a question that continues to haunt the American conscience. The early years of the war are brutal and bloody. You witness battles with names that will forever be etched into the American psyche. Bull Run, Antietam, Gettysburg. The technology of warfare has advanced, rifled muskets, repeating rifles, and early machine guns. But tactics often remain rooted in an earlier era, leading to horrific casualties. You see makeshift hospitals overflowing with wounded soldiers, the air thick with the smell of blood and antiseptic. You hear the mournful cries of families receiving news of their loved ones lost on distant battlefields. Here's a quirky tidbit. During the Civil War, embalming became a widespread practice for the first time in American history, allowing fallen soldiers to be sent home for burial. Before this, most soldiers were buried near where they fell.
So, while it was a grim necessity, it also allowed for a more personal, if heartbreaking, form of mourning. It's a strange comfort, isn't it, to have your loved one returned, even if they're no longer quite themselves.
Lincoln, initially focused on preserving the Union, comes to understand that the war must also be about ending slavery. On January 1, 1863, he issues the Emancipation Proclamation, declaring that all enslaved people in Confederate territory are free. You see enslaved people escaping to Union lines, seeking freedom and joining the fight. You witness the formation of African American regiments like the 54th Massachusetts, fighting with incredible bravery for their own liberation. The war becomes a moral crusade, a fight for human dignity. You see the tide slowly turn. Ulysses S. Grant, a relentless Union general, begins to grind down the Confederate forces in the West, while William Tecumseh Sherman embarks on his devastating march to the sea, destroying infrastructure and crippling the South's ability to wage war. You see the desperation in the Confederate ranks, the dwindling supplies, the growing weariness. The war is a total war, affecting everyone, not just the soldiers on the battlefield. Finally, in April 1865, you witness the surrender of Robert E. Lee's Army of Northern Virginia to Ulysses S. Grant at Appomattox Courthouse. The war is over. The Union is preserved and slavery is abolished with the passage of the 13th Amendment. You feel a profound sense of relief, but also a deep weariness. The cost has been immense. Over 600,000 lives lost, a generation scarred, and a nation irrevocably changed. But just as the nation begins to breathe a collective sigh of relief, tragedy strikes. You hear the news: President Lincoln has been assassinated by John Wilkes Booth. The joy of victory is replaced by a wave of grief and uncertainty. It's a cruel twist of fate, robbing the nation of the leader who had guided it through its darkest hour. Now comes Reconstruction, the challenging period of rebuilding the South and integrating formerly enslaved people into American society. You see the passage of the 14th Amendment, granting citizenship and equal protection under the law to all persons born or naturalized in the United States, and the 15th Amendment, guaranteeing African American men the right to vote. You witness the establishment of the Freedmen's Bureau, an agency designed to provide aid and education to formerly enslaved people. For a brief period, you see African Americans participating in politics, holding office, and building new lives. It's a moment of immense hope and possibility, a chance to truly live up to the ideals of the Declaration of Independence. But the forces of reaction are strong. White Southerners, many of whom resent the changes, resist Reconstruction through violence, intimidation, and discriminatory laws like the Black Codes and later Jim Crow laws. The Ku Klux Klan rises, terrorizing black communities and their allies. Historians still argue whether Reconstruction failed because of a lack of political will in the North, the deep-seated racism in the South, or a combination of both. The promise of equality, so tantalizingly close, begins to recede, leaving a legacy of racial injustice that will endure for another century. The nation has survived its greatest test, but the wounds of war and the unresolved issues of race will continue to shape its destiny. As the dust of the Civil War settles, you find yourself in a nation poised for a dramatic transformation. The scars of conflict are still fresh, but a new kind of energy is surging through the land, an energy fueled by innovation, ambition, and an insatiable desire for progress. You're witnessing the dawn of the Gilded Age, a period of unprecedented economic growth and technological advancement, but also one marked by stark social inequalities. This is the mainstream historical fact. The late 19th and early 20th centuries in the United States were characterized by rapid industrialization, urbanization, and the rise of powerful corporations, fundamentally reshaping American society and its economy. It's like the whole country decided to hit the fast-forward button, and suddenly, everything's moving at warp speed. You see the landscape changing before your eyes. Railroads, those iron arteries of commerce, crisscross the continent, connecting distant markets and facilitating the movement of goods and people. You might be a passenger, gazing out the window at the endless plains, or a worker, toiling in dangerous conditions to lay track across mountains and deserts. New industries emerge, driven by brilliant, often ruthless entrepreneurs. Andrew Carnegie, the steel magnate, builds an empire from iron ore and coal, pioneering new production methods and amassing a fortune. John D. Rockefeller, with his Standard Oil Company, monopolizes the oil industry, controlling nearly 90% of the nation's refineries. J.P. Morgan dominates finance, orchestrating mergers and acquisitions that create corporate behemoths. These are the captains of industry to some, robber barons to others. You hear the debates raging. Are these men heroes who built modern America, or villains who exploited workers and crushed competition? Historians still argue whether the immense wealth accumulated by these industrialists was a result of their genius and hard work, or largely due to exploitative labor practices and unchecked monopolies. It's a question that continues to spark heated discussions in economics and ethics. Cities swell with new arrivals. Immigrants from Europe, fleeing poverty and persecution, pour into urban centers, seeking work in factories and mines. You might be one of them, stepping off a crowded ship at Ellis Island, your head filled with dreams of a better life. The tenements are cramped and unsanitary. The work is grueling and the hours are long. You work 6 days a week, 10 or 12 hours a day for meager wages. Children as young as 5 or 6 labor in factories and coal mines, their small hands perfect for reaching into dangerous machinery. Here's a quirky tidbit. During this era, some factories would employ knocker-uppers, whose job it was to tap on people's windows with a long stick to wake them up for their shifts, long before alarm clocks were common. Imagine being woken up by a stranger poking your window with a stick every morning. It's certainly one way to start your day with a jolt.
But alongside the hardship, there's also incredible innovation. Thomas Edison, the Wizard of Menlo Park, invents the phonograph, the motion picture camera, and, most famously, the practical incandescent light bulb. You see cities illuminated at night for the first time, transforming urban life and extending the workday. Alexander Graham Bell invents the telephone, revolutionizing communication. Suddenly, you can talk to someone miles away, their voice crackling through a wire. It's a marvel, a true testament to human ingenuity. These inventions don't just change technology, they change society, altering how people live, work, and interact. The rapid changes also lead to social unrest and calls for reform. You witness the rise of labor unions like the American Federation of Labor, fighting for better wages, shorter hours, and safer working conditions. Strikes, often violent, erupt across the country as workers clash with management and, frequently, with government troops. You see the rise of the populist movement, farmers in the South and West who feel exploited by railroads and banks, demanding government regulation and a greater voice in politics. The progressive era, beginning in the early 20th century, is a response to these challenges. You see reformers, journalists, and politicians pushing for change. Muckraking journalists expose corruption in government and industry, shining a light on the dark underbelly of the Gilded Age. Upton Sinclair's novel The Jungle exposes the horrific conditions in the meatpacking industry, leading to the passage of the Pure Food and Drug Act and the Meat Inspection Act. It's a moment when the public demands accountability, and the government, however reluctantly, begins to respond.
Women, too, are increasingly active in public life. You see them joining reform movements, advocating for temperance, child labor laws, and, most importantly, for the right to vote.
The suffrage movement gains momentum, with women organizing parades, protests, and civil disobedience. You might be one of them, marching in the streets, demanding your voice be heard. The fight is long and arduous, but eventually, in 1920, the 19th Amendment is ratified, granting women the right to vote. It's a monumental victory, a recognition that half the population can no longer be excluded from the democratic process. It's a testament to the power of persistent activism, a reminder that change, however slow, is possible. As the nation enters the 20th century, it's a land of contrasts, immense wealth and grinding poverty, technological marvels and social injustices, soaring optimism and simmering discontent. The frontier may be officially closed, but new frontiers of industry, science, and social reform are opening up. You feel the energy, the dynamism, the sense that anything is possible, even as the challenges seem daunting. The United States has transformed from an agrarian republic into an industrial giant, a global power in the making. But the question remains, what kind of power will it be? And what will it mean for the lives of ordinary Americans?
As the 20th century truly begins to unfold, you find yourself in a nation grappling with its newfound global power. The Spanish-American War of 1898, a brief but decisive conflict, has propelled the United States onto the world stage, acquiring territories like Puerto Rico, Guam, and the Philippines. You're no longer just a continental power, you're an empire, with all the responsibilities and complexities that come with it. This is the mainstream historical fact. The late 19th and early 20th centuries marked the rise of American imperialism, as the nation sought to expand its influence and economic interests beyond its borders. It's like suddenly being invited to the grown-ups table, but you're not entirely sure which fork to use, or if you even want to be there. The acquisition of the Philippines in particular sparks a fierce debate. You hear arguments about whether it's America's duty to civilize and uplift these new populations, or if it's a betrayal of the very principles of self-determination that the nation was founded upon. A brutal war against Filipino insurgents, led by Emilio Aguinaldo, drags on for years, a stark reminder that empire building is rarely a clean or easy process. You see the contradictions inherent in a nation that champions liberty abroad while denying it to some of its own citizens at home. Historians still argue whether American imperialism was a natural extension of manifest destiny or a departure from the nation's founding ideals. It's a debate that forces a hard look at the motivations behind expansion. Meanwhile, at home, the progressive era continues to gain momentum. You see presidents like Teddy Roosevelt, a lifelong figure, taking on powerful trusts and advocating for conservation. He's a trust buster, breaking up monopolies that he believes stifle competition and harm the public. You might be a worker cheering him on as he champions the rights of the common man against the excesses of big business. He's also a passionate outdoorsman, establishing national parks and forests, preserving vast tracts of wilderness for future generations. Here's a quirky tidbit. Theodore Roosevelt was shot during an assassination attempt in 1912, but still insisted on delivering a 90-minute speech before seeking medical attention, famously stating, "It takes more than that to kill a bull moose." Talk about dedication to your craft, or perhaps a serious case of adrenaline-fueled stubbornness.
Woodrow Wilson, another progressive president, leads the nation into World War I. You initially hear calls for neutrality, a desire to stay out of the bloody European conflict. But German submarine warfare, particularly the sinking of the Lusitania with American passengers on board, and the Zimmermann telegram, which proposes a German-Mexican alliance against the U.S., eventually draw America into the war in 1917. You might be a young man, donning a uniform and heading over there to the trenches of France. You see the horrors of modern warfare, poison gas, machine guns, and endless mud.
The war is a global conflict, and America's entry tips the balance, helping the Allies achieve victory. You feel a sense of national pride, a belief that America has fought to make the world safe for democracy. After the war, Wilson champions the League of Nations, an international organization designed to prevent future conflicts. You hear his impassioned pleas for global cooperation, a vision of a new world order. But at home, there's a strong desire to return to normalcy, to retreat from international entanglements. The Senate, wary of surrendering American sovereignty, rejects the Treaty of Versailles and refuses to join the League of Nations. You witness the nation turning inward, embracing isolationism, a decision that will have profound consequences in the decades to come. It's a bit like throwing a huge party, then immediately locking yourself in your room and refusing to talk to anyone. The 1920s roar to life. You're in a speakeasy, the air thick with cigarette smoke and the illicit scent of bathtub gin. Jazz music, vibrant and rebellious, fills the air, and flappers with their bobbed hair and short skirts dance with abandon. It's an era of unprecedented prosperity, fueled by mass production, consumerism, and easy credit. You buy a Model T Ford, a radio, and a refrigerator, symbols of a new, modern lifestyle. The stock market soars, and everyone seems to be getting rich, or at least everyone you know. You feel a sense of boundless optimism, a belief that the good times will never end. This is the mainstream historical fact. The 1920s, often called the Roaring Twenties, was a decade of economic boom, cultural innovation, and social change, but also one marked by underlying economic vulnerabilities and social tensions. It's like a party that's just a little too loud, a little too wild, and you know, deep down, it can't last forever.
But beneath the glittering surface, there are cracks. Farmers struggle with overproduction and falling prices. Labor unions lose ground. And the stock market, fueled by speculation and unchecked optimism, becomes a house of cards. You hear the whispers of concern, the warnings from economists, but they're drowned out by the clamor of the bull market. Then, on October 29, 1929, Black Tuesday hits. The stock market crashes, sending shockwaves through the economy. You watch in horror as fortunes are wiped out overnight, businesses collapse, and banks fail. The Great Depression begins, a decade of unprecedented economic hardship. You see soup kitchens, bread lines, and shanty towns springing up across the country, grim reminders of the shattered American dream. Millions are unemployed, homeless, and hungry. It's a stark contrast to the carefree days of the Roaring Twenties, a sudden, brutal awakening. Historians still argue whether the Great Depression was primarily caused by the stock market crash, banking failures, or a combination of global economic factors and government policies. It's a complex puzzle with no easy answers. As the Great Depression grips the nation, you find yourself in a world turned upside down. The vibrant energy of the Roaring Twenties has been replaced by a pervasive sense of despair. You see men selling apples on street corners, families evicted from their homes, and long lines stretching outside soup kitchens. The American dream, once so tangible, now feels like a cruel mirage. This is the mainstream historical fact. The Great Depression was a severe worldwide economic depression that took place during the 1930s, profoundly impacting American society and leading to significant government intervention. It's like the entire country suddenly ran out of batteries and everyone's just slowly grinding to a halt. In 1932, Franklin Delano Roosevelt is elected president, promising a new deal for the American people. You hear his reassuring voice on the radio, delivering his fireside chats, a direct and intimate connection that builds trust and hope. He tells you, the only thing we have to fear is fear itself. And you believe him.
The New Deal is a series of ambitious programs, public works projects, financial reforms and regulations designed to combat the effects of the Great Depression. You might find yourself working for the Civilian Conservation Corps, planting trees or building roads in a national park, earning a small wage that helps your family survive. Or perhaps you're a farmer, benefiting from government subsidies that help stabilize agricultural prices. Historians still argue whether the New Deal truly ended the Great Depression, or if it merely softened its blow, with World War II ultimately providing the necessary economic stimulus. It's a complex economic puzzle, with many pieces still debated. But even as the nation struggles, the shadow of war begins to loom large across the globe. You hear news of aggressive expansion by totalitarian regimes in Europe and Asia, Nazi Germany, Fascist Italy, and Imperial Japan. America, still reeling from the Depression and clinging to its isolationist tendencies, tries to stay out of the growing conflict. You hear debates about neutrality, about whether America should once again send its young men to fight in a foreign war. Here's a quirky tidbit. During the early years of World War II, before the U.S. entered, many Americans were so committed to neutrality that they would hold Bundles for Britain drives, collecting clothes and supplies for the British, but carefully avoiding any direct military aid. It's like trying to help your friend move without actually touching any of their boxes, just in case you get a splinter.
Then, on December 7th, 1941, everything changes. You hear the shocking news: Japan has attacked Pearl Harbor, a naval base in Hawaii. The attack is swift and devastating, sinking or damaging numerous American warships and killing thousands of servicemen. The next day, President Roosevelt declares war on Japan, and soon after, Germany and Italy declare war on the United States. America is now fully engaged in World War II. You might be a young man enlisting in the armed forces, ready to fight for freedom and democracy. Or you might be a woman stepping into a factory to build planes, tanks, and ships, becoming a Rosie the Riveter, a symbol of female strength and patriotism. The entire nation mobilizes, transforming its industrial capacity into an arsenal of democracy. The war is fought on two main fronts: the European theater and the Pacific theater. In Europe, you witness the D-Day landings in Normandy, France on June 6, 1944, a massive amphibious invasion that marks the beginning of the end for Nazi Germany. You see the bravery of American soldiers fighting their way across France, through the Battle of the Bulge, and into Germany. In the Pacific, you witness the brutal island-hopping campaigns, the fierce battles for places like Iwo Jima and Okinawa, where Japanese soldiers fight to the last man. You see the immense sacrifices made by American servicemen and women, the courage and resilience in the face of unimaginable horrors. The war is a global struggle against tyranny, and America plays a decisive role in securing Allied victory. Finally, in August 1945, the war comes to a dramatic and terrifying end. You hear the news of the atomic bombs dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, Japan, ushering in the nuclear age. Japan surrenders, and the world breathes a collective sigh of relief. The war is over, but the world has been irrevocably changed. The United States emerges from World War II as the dominant global power, its economy booming, its military unmatched, and its moral authority seemingly unassailable. You feel a sense of triumph, but also a profound awareness of the destructive power that humanity now wields. It's a moment of both immense pride and deep apprehension. But the peace is short-lived. Almost immediately, a new conflict begins, not with bombs and bullets, but with ideology and proxy wars. The Soviet Union, America's wartime ally, emerges as its new adversary.
You're now in the era of the Cold War, a decades-long struggle between the United States and its allies representing democracy and capitalism, and the Soviet Union and its satellite states representing communism. This is the mainstream historical fact. The Cold War was a geopolitical rivalry between the United States and the Soviet Union and their respective allies that lasted from the mid-1940s until the early 1990s, characterized by an arms race, proxy wars, and ideological competition. It's like a really tense staring contest, but with nuclear weapons pointed at each other.
You witnessed the Berlin blockade, the Korean War, the Cuban Missile Crisis, moments of intense tension that bring the world to the brink of nuclear annihilation. You see the rise of McCarthyism, a period of intense anti-communist paranoia at home, where accusations of disloyalty and subversion ruin careers and lives. You build bomb shelters in your backyard, practice duck-and-cover drills in school, and live with the constant threat of nuclear war hanging over your head. It's a strange and unsettling time, a period of constant vigilance and underlying fear. Historians still argue whether the Cold War was an inevitable clash of ideologies or if it could have been avoided through different diplomatic approaches. It's a question that continues to inform discussions about international relations and conflict resolution. As the Cold War casts its long shadow, you find yourself navigating a world of paradoxes. On one hand, there's the pervasive fear of nuclear annihilation, the constant hum of geopolitical tension. On the other, there's a burgeoning sense of optimism, a belief in progress, and a growing demand for social justice at home. You're in the 1950s and 60s, a period of immense social and cultural upheaval, where the fight for civil rights takes center stage. This is the mainstream historical fact. The civil rights movement was a decades-long struggle by African Americans to achieve equal rights under the law in the United States, culminating in landmark legislation like the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and the Voting Rights Act of 1965. It's like a slow-motion revolution, fought not with guns, but with courage, conviction, and a whole lot of singing. You witness the courage of Rosa Parks, refusing to give up her seat on a bus in Montgomery, Alabama, sparking a year-long bus boycott that galvanizes the movement. You hear the powerful, resonant voice of Martin Luther King Jr., preaching nonviolent resistance, inspired by Mahatma Gandhi. You see young black and white students sitting in at segregated lunch counters, enduring taunts and abuse with quiet dignity. You march with them, your feet aching, your heart swelling with a mixture of fear and determination as you demand an end to segregation and discrimination. Historians still argue whether the civil rights movement's success was primarily due to the moral force of nonviolent protest or the strategic use of legal challenges and federal intervention. It's a debate that highlights the multifaceted nature of social change. But the struggle isn't always peaceful. You see the violence unleashed by those who resist change, police dogs attacking protesters, fire hoses turned on children, bombings of churches and homes. You witness the assassination of Medgar Evers, a civil rights leader, and the tragic bombing of the 16th Street Baptist Church in Birmingham, killing 4 young girls. The images are seared into your memory, a stark reminder of the brutality of racism. Here's a quirky tidbit. During the civil rights movement, some activists use code words and secret signals to communicate and organize, often disguised as everyday conversations to avoid detection by authorities. It's like a real-life spy novel, but with much higher stakes and much less glamorous outfits.
While the civil rights movement is reshaping America from within, the Cold War continues to define its foreign policy. You're in the midst of the space race, a technological and ideological competition with the Soviet Union. You watch, captivated, as Sputnik, the first artificial satellite, orbits the Earth, a chilling reminder of Soviet technological prowess. But America responds, pouring resources into its own space program. You hold your breath as Alan Shepard becomes the first American in space. And then, in 1969, you watch in awe as Neil Armstrong takes one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind, on the surface of the moon. It's a moment of national triumph, a demonstration of American ingenuity and determination, a welcome distraction from the turmoil at home. It's like a really expensive game of hide-and-seek, but with rockets and moon rocks. However, the optimism of the space race is tempered by the escalating conflict in Vietnam. You hear the debates, the protests, the growing disillusionment. What started as a mission to contain communism in Southeast Asia spirals into a long, costly, and deeply divisive war. You might be a young man, drafted into the military, sent to fight in a jungle half a world away, where the enemy is often unseen and the objectives unclear. You see the images on your television screen, napalm attacks, body counts, and the grim reality of guerrilla warfare. The anti-war movement gains momentum at home, fueled by a generation that questions authority and demands peace. You witness massive demonstrations, clashes with police, and the burning of draft cards. Historians still argue whether the Vietnam War was a necessary stand against communism or a tragic miscalculation driven by Cold War paranoia. It's a debate that continues to shape American foreign policy and military strategy. The 1960s are a decade of profound social and cultural change. You see the rise of the counterculture, with its emphasis on peace, love, and rock and roll. Woodstock, a massive music festival in 1969, becomes a symbol of this movement, a gathering of hundreds of thousands of young people seeking an alternative way of life. You witness the sexual revolution, the women's liberation movement, and the growing environmental movement. Rachel Carson's book, Silent Spring, exposes the dangers of pesticides, sparking a new awareness of ecological issues. The first Earth Day in 1970 marks the beginning of a concerted effort to protect the planet. It's a time of immense social ferment, a period when traditional values are challenged and new ideas take root. It's like the entire country decided to go through an awkward, rebellious teenage phase, but with much better music.
But the decade also ends with a sense of unease. The assassinations of Martin Luther King Jr. and Robert F. Kennedy in 1968 leave a gaping hole in the nation's leadership. The Vietnam War drags on, dividing the country and eroding trust in government. The Watergate scandal, which unfolds in the early 1970s, reveals a pattern of political corruption and abuse of power at the highest levels of government, leading to President Richard Nixon's resignation. You feel a sense of cynicism creeping in, a questioning of the institutions that once seemed so solid. The optimism of the early 1960s gives way to a more sober, even pessimistic outlook. The nation has endured war, social upheaval, and political scandal, and you wonder what challenges lie ahead. The American experiment continues, but it's clear that the path forward will be anything but smooth.
As the 1970s unfold, you find yourself in a nation grappling with a new set of challenges, both at home and abroad. The optimism of the post-war era has faded, replaced by a sense of uncertainty and introspection. The Vietnam War has left deep wounds, and the Watergate scandal has eroded public trust in government. You're in an era of economic stagnation, energy crises, and a shifting global landscape. This is the mainstream historical fact. The 1970s in the United States were marked by economic challenges, a crisis of confidence in government, and a reevaluation of America's role in the world. It's like the party's over, the lights are on, and everyone's realizing how much of a mess they've made. The energy crisis hits hard. You remember the long lines at gas stations, the rationing, and the rising prices. The OPEC oil embargo of 1973, a response to U.S. support for Israel, highlights America's vulnerability and dependence on foreign oil. You see smaller, more fuel-efficient cars start to appear on the roads, a stark contrast to the gas-guzzling behemoths of the 1950s and 60s. Inflation soars, and unemployment rises, leading to a phenomenon known as stagflation, a stagnant economy combined with high inflation. You hear economists scratching their heads trying to figure out how to fix this new, perplexing problem. Historians still argue whether the economic woes of the 1970s were primarily due to external factors like the oil shocks or internal issues like government spending and a shift in manufacturing. It's a complex economic puzzle that continues to be debated. Culturally, the 1970s are a fascinating mix of lingering counterculture ideals and a growing conservatism. You see disco balls spinning in nightclubs, hear the thumping beat of Saturday Night Fever, and witness the rise of blockbuster movies like Jaws and Star Wars, offering an escape from the grim realities of the day. But you also see a growing backlash against the social changes of the 1960s. The rise of the New Right, a conservative political movement, gains momentum, fueled by concerns about moral decay, rising crime rates, and the perceived excesses of government. You hear the voices of figures like Jerry Falwell and Phyllis Schlafly, advocating for traditional values and a return to what they see as America's moral foundations. Here's a quirky tidbit. The Rubik's Cube, that infuriatingly addictive puzzle, was first introduced in the U.S. in 1980, but it was invented in 1974. It's like the perfect metaphor for the decade, a complex, colorful puzzle that everyone was trying to solve, often with frustrating results. Foreign policy continues to be dominated by the Cold War, but with a new emphasis on détente, a thawing of relations with the Soviet Union and China. You witness President Nixon's historic visit to China in 1972, a diplomatic breakthrough that reshapes global geopolitics. You see arms control treaties signed, aimed at limiting the nuclear arms race. But even with détente, tensions remain. The Soviet invasion of Afghanistan in 1979 and the Iranian hostage crisis, where American diplomats are held captive for 444 days, serve as stark reminders of the fragility of peace and the limits of American power. You feel a sense of national humiliation, a questioning of America's ability to control events on the world stage.
The 1980s usher in a new era, often called the Reagan Revolution. You see Ronald Reagan, a former actor, elected president in 1980, promising to restore American pride and prosperity. He advocates for lower taxes, reduced government spending, and a strong military. You hear his optimistic rhetoric, his belief in American exceptionalism, and his unwavering stance against the Soviet Union. He famously calls the Soviet Union an evil empire, a stark contrast to the détente of the previous decade. You witness a massive military buildup, including the controversial Strategic Defense Initiative dubbed Star Wars, a proposed missile defense system that many critics dismiss as science fiction. It's like a really expensive game of laser tag, but with actual lasers and potentially world-ending consequences. Economically, the 1980s see a shift towards deregulation and supply-side economics, often called Reaganomics. You see a booming stock market, a rise in consumer spending, and a growing gap between the rich and the poor. The decade is characterized by conspicuous consumption, designer labels, and a focus on individual wealth. You might be working on Wall Street, making fortunes in the burgeoning financial sector, or struggling in a manufacturing town, watching as factories close and jobs disappear overseas. Historians still argue whether Reaganomics was responsible for the economic prosperity of the 1980s, or if it exacerbated social inequalities and contributed to long-term economic problems. It's a debate that continues to shape economic policy discussions.
As the 1980s draw to a close, you witness a truly momentous event, the collapse of the Soviet Union. You see the Berlin Wall, that symbol of Cold War division, come tumbling down in 1989. You watch as Eastern European nations break free from Soviet control, and then in 1991, the Soviet Union itself dissolves, ending decades of ideological struggle. The Cold War is over. America has won. You feel a sense of triumph, a belief that democracy and capitalism have prevailed. It's a moment of profound global change, a reshaping of the world order. You wonder what the future holds for a world without the constant threat of superpower confrontation. It's like the end of a really long, tense movie, and you're not quite sure what to do with yourself now that the credits are rolling.
With the Cold War concluded, you find yourself in a new global landscape, one characterized by rapid technological advancement and an increasingly interconnected world. The 1990s usher in an era of unprecedented economic prosperity and a sense of triumphalism as America stands as the sole superpower. This is the mainstream historical fact. The 1990s in the United States were marked by a period of economic growth driven by the rise of the Internet and globalization, and a shift in foreign policy focus from Cold War containment to humanitarian intervention and nation-building. It's like the world finally exhaled after decades of holding its breath, and everyone decided to go shopping. You witnessed the birth of the World Wide Web, and suddenly, information is at your fingertips. You get your first email address, navigate the clunky early internet with dial-up modems, and marvel at the endless possibilities of this new digital frontier. The dot-com boom takes off, fueled by venture capital and the promise of a new economy. You see companies like Amazon and Google emerge, transforming how you shop, communicate, and access information. It's a time of rapid innovation, where yesterday's cutting-edge technology is today's antique. Here's a quirky tidbit. The first ever website went live in 1991, and it was a simple page explaining how the World Wide Web worked. Imagine building a revolutionary technology and then using it to explain itself. It's very meta, isn't it? Politically, the 1990s are dominated by the presidency of Bill Clinton. You see him navigate a complex domestic agenda, including welfare reform and attempts at healthcare reform. He presides over a period of economic boom, and you feel a sense of stability and optimism. However, his presidency is also marked by scandal, culminating in impeachment proceedings. You witness the intense partisan battles, the media frenzy, and the deep divisions that emerge in American politics. Historians still argue whether the impeachment of Bill Clinton was a legitimate exercise of constitutional power or a politically motivated attack. It's a debate that continues to highlight the enduring partisan divides in American governance. Foreign policy in the post-Cold War era is less about containing a single adversary and more about responding to regional conflicts and humanitarian crises. You see American intervention in the Balkans, in places like Bosnia and Kosovo, as the U.S. takes on a role as global peacekeeper. You witness the Gulf War in 1991, a swift and decisive military operation to liberate Kuwait from Iraqi invasion, showcasing America's military might. But even with these successes, new threats begin to emerge, less conventional and more diffuse. You hear whispers of terrorism, of non-state actors who pose a different kind of challenge to global security. It's like the big bad wolf is gone, but now there are a lot of smaller, angrier wolves nipping at your heels.
As the 20th century draws to a close, you're gripped by a new kind of anxiety, the Y2K bug. You hear dire predictions of computer systems crashing, planes falling from the sky, and widespread chaos as the calendar rolls over from 1999 to 2000. You stock up on canned goods, withdraw cash from the bank, and prepare for the worst. Of course, when January 1st, 2000 arrives, nothing happens. The world continues to spin, the computers keep humming, and the planes stay in the air. It's a collective sigh of relief, and perhaps a bit of a chuckle at the absurdity of it all. It's a mainstream historical fact that the Y2K bug was a widespread fear of computer system failures at the turn of the millennium, which ultimately proved to be largely unfounded due to extensive preventative measures. It's like preparing for the apocalypse only to find out it was just a really elaborate prank. But the sense of calm is short-lived. The new millennium begins with a horrific shock. On September 11, 2001, you watch in disbelief as hijacked airplanes crash into the World Trade Center in New York City, the Pentagon in Washington, D.C., and a field in Pennsylvania. Thousands of lives are lost, and the nation is plunged into grief and fear. The attacks fundamentally reshape American foreign policy and domestic security. You see the immediate aftermath, the outpouring of national unity, the search and rescue efforts, and the profound sense of vulnerability. The war on terror begins, a global campaign against extremist groups leading to invasions of Afghanistan and Iraq. You witness the debates over homeland security, civil liberties, and the use of enhanced interrogation techniques. Historians still argue whether the war on terror achieved its stated objectives or if it created new challenges and destabilized regions. It's a complex and ongoing debate with far-reaching consequences. Domestically, the early 21st century is marked by economic challenges, including the Great Recession of 2008, triggered by a collapse in the housing market and a financial crisis. You see foreclosures, job losses, and a sense of economic insecurity. The government responds with massive bailouts and stimulus packages aimed at preventing a complete economic meltdown. You witness the rise of social media, transforming how you communicate, consume news, and engage with the world. Platforms like Facebook and Twitter become ubiquitous, creating new forms of connection, but also new challenges related to misinformation and polarization. The nation grapples with issues of climate change, healthcare reform, and growing political polarization. The American experiment continues to evolve, facing new challenges and opportunities in a rapidly changing world. You feel the weight of these complex issues, the sense that the future is uncertain, but also the enduring resilience of a nation that has faced countless trials and emerged, however scarred, still standing.
As the 21st century progresses, you find yourself in a world accelerating at an unprecedented pace. The digital revolution, which began in the late 20th century, has permeated every aspect of your life, transforming how you work, learn, and interact. You carry powerful computers in your pockets, capable of connecting you to a vast, global network of information and people. This is the mainstream historical fact. The early 21st century has been characterized by rapid technological advancements, particularly in information technology and artificial intelligence, leading to profound societal shifts and new ethical considerations. It's like living in a science fiction movie, but without the cool flying cars. Yet. The rise of social media, which you witnessed in its nascent stages, has matured into a dominant force in communication and public discourse. You navigate a landscape where news spreads instantly, often without verification, and where echo chambers can reinforce existing beliefs. The lines between public and private life blur, and the constant connectivity can feel both liberating and overwhelming. You see the power of these platforms to mobilize movements, spread awareness, and connect people across vast distances. But you also see their potential for misinformation, polarization, and the erosion of traditional media. Historians still argue whether social media has ultimately strengthened or weakened democratic institutions. It's a debate that touches on the very nature of truth and community in the digital age. Economically, the early 21st century has been a period of both innovation and instability. The Great Recession of 2008, a painful reminder of the interconnectedness of global finance, led to widespread job losses and a slow recovery. You've seen the gig economy emerge, offering flexibility, but also raising questions about worker rights and benefits. The debate over income inequality intensifies as the gap between the wealthiest and the rest of the population continues to widen. You hear discussions about automation and artificial intelligence and their potential impact on the future of work. Will robots take your job? Will you be able to afford a robot butler? These are the questions that keep you up at night. Here's a quirky tidbit. The term selfie was added to the Oxford English Dictionary in 2013, a testament to how quickly new technologies and cultural phenomena can become ingrained in everyday language. Imagine explaining that to someone from the 1950s. They'd probably think you were talking about a self-portrait painted by a very vain artist. Politically, the nation grapples with increasing polarization. You see the rise of partisan media, where news is often filtered through ideological lenses, making it harder to find common ground. The political discourse becomes more acrimonious, and compromise seems increasingly elusive. You witness intense debates over issues like healthcare reform, immigration, gun control, and climate change. The Supreme Court, with its lifetime appointments, becomes a battleground for ideological control, shaping the legal and social landscape for generations. You feel the weight of these divisions, the sense that the nation is pulling apart even as it faces shared challenges. Historians still argue whether the current level of political polarization is a temporary phase or a fundamental shift in American democracy. It's a question that weighs heavily on the minds of many.
Globally, America's role continues to evolve. The War on Terror, initiated after 9/11, has reshaped foreign policy, leading to prolonged engagements in Afghanistan and Iraq. You've seen the rise of new global powers, particularly China, challenging America's unipolar moment. Climate change emerges as a pressing global threat, demanding international cooperation and difficult policy choices. You witness extreme weather events, rising sea levels, and the growing urgency of environmental action. The world feels smaller, more interconnected, and the challenges seem more complex than ever before. It's like you're on a very fast treadmill, and the scenery keeps changing, but you're not entirely sure where you're going. Socially, the early 21st century has seen continued progress in civil rights and social justice, alongside persistent challenges. You've witnessed the legalization of same-sex marriage nationwide, a landmark victory for LGBTQ+ rights. The Black Lives Matter movement brings renewed attention to issues of racial injustice and police brutality. The #MeToo movement exposes widespread sexual harassment and assault, leading to a reckoning in various industries. You see a growing awareness of diversity, equity, and inclusion, and a greater willingness to confront historical injustices. But you also see continued resistance, backlash, and the persistence of systemic inequalities. The fight for a more just and equitable society is ongoing, a continuous struggle that demands vigilance and commitment. As you look around, you see a nation that is more diverse than ever before, a vibrant tapestry of cultures, languages, and traditions. You hear new voices, new perspectives, enriching the national conversation. But this diversity also brings new challenges, as the nation grapples with questions of identity, belonging, and how to forge a common future from so many different threads. The American experiment, born in revolution and forged through centuries of struggle, continues to unfold. You are a part of this ongoing story, a witness to its triumphs and its tribulations. The future is unwritten, but the lessons of the past offer guidance, a quiet whisper in the night, reminding you of the resilience, the adaptability, and the enduring spirit of a nation constantly striving to live up to its ideals.
As you stand at the cusp of the present, gazing into the uncertain expanse of the future, you carry with you the echoes of centuries past. The American experiment, born of revolution and forged in the crucible of conflict, continues its relentless, often messy evolution. You've witnessed its triumphs and its tragedies, its moments of soaring idealism and its periods of profound hypocrisy.
You've seen the nation expand, industrialize, and grapple with its identity on a global stage. This is the mainstream historical fact. The United States in the 21st century continues to face complex domestic and international challenges, including political polarization, economic inequality, and its evolving role in a multipolar world, while simultaneously demonstrating remarkable resilience and adaptability. It's like being on a roller coaster that never quite stops, and you're just trying to keep your hands inside the car. One of the most defining characteristics of the current era is the accelerating pace of technological change. You've seen the internet transform from a niche tool to an indispensable part of daily life. Now, you're on the cusp of an artificial intelligence revolution, with algorithms and machine learning poised to reshape industries, redefine work, and challenge fundamental notions of human creativity and intelligence. You hear the debates about the ethical implications of AI, the potential for job displacement, and the need for responsible development. It's a brave new world, and you're right in the middle of it. Here's a quirky tidbit. The first recorded use of the term artificial intelligence was in 1956 at a conference at Dartmouth College, long before anyone had a smartphone or even a personal computer. It's like they were predicting the future, but they probably thought it would involve more robots serving tea and fewer algorithms recommending cat videos. Environmental concerns continue to mount. You witness the increasing frequency and intensity of extreme weather events, hurricanes, wildfires, droughts, stark reminders of the urgent need to address climate change. The scientific consensus is clear, but the political will to enact meaningful change remains elusive. You see grassroots movements pushing for renewable energy, sustainable practices, and environmental justice, while powerful interests resist. Historians still argue whether humanity will be able to collectively address the existential threat of climate change before irreversible damage is done. It's a question that hangs heavy over the future, a silent challenge to your generation. Socially, the nation continues to grapple with its diverse identity. You see ongoing discussions about race, gender, and sexual orientation as marginalized communities continue to push for full equality and recognition. The legacy of slavery and systemic discrimination remains a powerful force, shaping contemporary debates about justice and reparations. You witness movements for social change driven by a renewed sense of activism and a desire to create a more inclusive society. But you also see resistance, a clinging to old prejudices, and a struggle to reconcile the past with the present. It's a continuous conversation, often difficult, sometimes painful, but essential for the nation's ongoing journey towards its stated ideals.
Economically, the challenges of inequality persist. You see debates about the minimum wage, affordable health care, and access to education. The gig economy, while offering flexibility, also raises questions about the future of work and the social safety net. The national debt continues to grow, and you hear economists and politicians debating the best path forward. The global economy is more interconnected than ever, meaning that events in one corner of the world can have ripple effects across the globe. It's a complex web of dependencies, and you're just one thread in it. Politically, the polarization you've witnessed has intensified. The media landscape is fragmented, and trust in institutions, from government to journalism, has eroded. You see the rise of populism, both on the left and the right, and a questioning of traditional political norms. Elections are fiercely contested, and the outcomes often leave a significant portion of the population feeling unheard or unrepresented. The very foundations of democratic governance are being tested, and you are a participant in this ongoing experiment. Historians still argue whether the current political climate represents a temporary deviation or a fundamental shift in the American political system. It's a question that will likely be answered by the choices made in the coming decades. As you reflect on this long, winding journey through American history, you realize that it's not a static story, but a living, breathing narrative,
constantly being written by the actions and choices of its people. You are a part of this story, your own life intertwined with the grand sweep of events. The challenges are immense, the path ahead uncertain, but the resilience, the adaptability, and the enduring spirit of the American people remain. The nation has faced countless crises, endured profound divisions, and yet it has always found a way to move forward, however imperfectly. The pursuit of a more perfect union, a more just society, and a more prosperous future continues. It's a journey without end, a constant striving, a perpetual becoming.
Now, as the echoes of history begin to fade and the last whispers of the past gently recede, allow your mind to drift. The grand narratives, the epic struggles, the quiet moments of human connection, they all settle into the soft, comforting folds of memory. You've traveled through time, witnessed the birth of a nation, its growth, its trials, and its transformations. The weight of all that history, so vast and intricate, now feels light, like a feather settling on a calm pond. Let the images soften, the voices quiet, and the complexities smooth themselves into a gentle hum. There's no need to hold on to every detail, every date, every name. Just the feeling, the essence of a journey completed, a story told. You are safe, you are warm, and the world outside is quiet. The day's worries, the mind's chatter, they all dissolve into the stillness of the night. Rest now, and let the gentle current of sleep carry you away. Your mind is clear, your spirit at peace. The long journey is over, and a deep restorative calm awaits.